Hello everybody and welcome to the 7th video in our series of videos on the plantations in Ireland. As always, we begin with our learning outcomes, so by the end of this presentation you guys should know what Charles I's changes in policies were that caused such controversy in Ireland. Second, you guys should know what caused the 1641 rebellion and some facts about that rebellion. And finally, you guys should know what happened in England that led to Oliver Cromwell eventually coming to Ireland. As we saw in the last video, the English had learned their lessons from previous plantations and carried out a successful plantation in Ulster. The king who ordered that plantation, James I, died in 1625 and he was replaced by his son, King Charles I. Now, Charles admired the power of the King of France and the Holy Roman Emperor, and he wanted to rule without having to ask Parliament for permission to do things. To do this, he needed to extend his personal control, and he needed to extend it over both the government and the church. In 1632, he appointed a very close friend and ally, Sir Thomas Wentworth, as the Lord Deputy in Ireland to ensure that Charles had supreme power over the government and church in Ireland. Remember, the Lord Deputy is the King's representative in the country. As the King's representative, Wentworth alienated himself from all the traditional groups in Ireland, extorting money from the Old English with the Pale, and pushing Protestantism and planning a plantation in Connacht. However, this plantation never actually came to pass, as Charles was getting in trouble back in England. So what was the trouble that Charles was getting into? Well, he refused to use Parliament, who then in turn refused to vote him the money he needed to rule. So he imposed a lot of unusual taxes to get his money, like a tax on ship money, the tax trade on the sea. This affected the Ulster guilds we looked at that who planted dairy in the last video. They resisted paying these taxes, and in 1639 Charles officially confiscated their lands. However, probably the biggest mistake that Charles made was trying to establish greater control over the church for himself. He alienated the Catholic Old English and the Gaelic Irish by persecuting them, but he also managed to alienate a lot of the new planters in Ulster. Now, until now, the Church of Ireland had tolerated a wide range of Protestant beliefs and practices. So Presbyterians, who had large numbers among the Scottish planters in Ulster, were happy to join Church of Ireland churches as they could continue to practice their religion as they believed they should. However, Lord Deputy Wentworth enforced Charles's vision of a uniform church by introducing a new common book of prayer. This policy met massive resistance in both Scotland and Ulster, and the Scottish agreed to take a covenant, which is a religious vow to resist these changes. In 1639, Wentworth marched to Ulster to force the Ulster Scots, who had signed up to this covenant, to take the Black Oath, denouncing their covenant. But these Covenanters, as they were known, had powerful friends in Parliament, which was in opposition to King Charles I. They used their power to impeach Wentworth. They found him guilty of treason, and in 1641 they executed him. And this further deepened the divide between Charles I and the Parliament. The Gaelic Irish were closely monitoring all these developments, and when Charles suffered a military humiliation in Scotland in 1640 trying to enforce his common book of prayer, the Gaelic Irish believed it was time to rise in rebellion to try to take back their land. The rebellion under the leadership of Sir Phelim O'Neill started on the 22nd of October in 1641 in Ulster. The Irish victories were so quick and decisive in the first few days that they really didn't know what to do with all of those who had surrendered. Thousands of planters were driven off the land, and 1,000 more were massacred by the Gaelic Irish. Stories of the massacres were exaggerated in England and were met with absolute horror. The 1640s turned out to be one of the most confusing periods in Irish history, as while this rebellion was happening, civil war broke out in England between Charles I and his defenders, called the Cavaliers, against Parliament's Roundheads, as they were called, with Oliver Cromwell emerging as one of their greatest leaders. This led to the shifting of allegiances between all four groups in Ireland: the Gaelic Irish, the Anglo-Norman Irish, the Old English, and now the New English, who had been planted recently. And there were years of massacres and battles and sieges. English government in Ireland pretty much crumbled, and in October 1642, the Gaelic Irish and the Old English, who had always been traditionally enemies, united to form the Confederation of Kilkenny to rule the country. Massive battles at Dungan's Hill in Meath and Knocknanoose Hill in County Cork led to 3,000 and 4,000 men being killed respectively in those battles. By 1648, Charles I's cause was lost, as he was unable to get the better of Sir Thomas Fairfax, Oliver Cromwell, and their new model army. He was recaptured and executed by Parliament on the 30th of January 1649. England set up a new government ruled by the winners of the Civil War, and this new government was known as the Commonwealth. One of the first things the new Commonwealth government did was turn its attention to crushing the Irish who had opposed them. Oliver Cromwell, the leading general of the Civil War, was named Lord Lieutenant or Lord Deputy in 1649, and he was given £100,000 and 12,000 battle-hardened soldiers from the new model army that had just won the English Civil War. Cromwell made it clear from the beginning that he wasn't just coming to put down the rebellion, but he was coming for revenge for the massacre of the Protestants in 1641 when the rebellion began. And in the next video, we will see Cromwell's brutal invasion of Ireland. That brings us to the end of our presentation. So by now you guys should know what Charles's changes in policy were that caused such controversy in Ireland. You guys should know what caused the 1641 rebellion and some facts about it. And finally, you guys should know what happened in England that led to Oliver Cromwell eventually coming to Ireland. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys got something good from this video.